Good morning, I'm Carolyn, and I'm here to read for you a book called Peg and the Whale. Notice her slicker? And this is for Read Aloud Delaware. Peg and the Whale. She's quite a girl. Peg was born upon the bright blue sea. There she is swinging from the bucket on the mast of her parents' fishing boat. And there she is pulling in lines, hanging sheets, which are sails, dropping anchor, and gutting fish along with the rest of them. A big strapping lass Peg was one of the things to do, not one to do things halfway. Anything she turns her hand to, she does good at. But she wanted more than anything that she wanted big and better and best. She wanted to be the world's best fisherman. She caught pretty much every fish that swam. She had hooked herring, halibut, shoe fly, and hogfish. She had landed smelt, sole, scuttleback, sturgeon. She caught a shark once, but she threw it back because it was too small. Bigger than she. But Peg had her sights set higher. You see, she wanted to catch something really big. She wanted to catch herself a whale. A whale, said her father. It's not a fish, it's a mammal. But Peg would not have none of that foolishness. If it swims and spends most of the time in the water, it's a fish, and I'm going to catch me one. Well, Peg was pushing 7, and she figured it was high time to make something of herself. So one night in harbor, she packed up her fishing rod, left her parents a note, and signed on with a whaling ship named Viper. Her leaving in the night. I'm glad she left her parents a note. The Viper sailed out of Lombardy the next night. It was big and oily and covered with barnacles. The crew was a mean-looking group, and first mate Bart Maxwell could curse and spit better than all the others put together. I want to catch a whale, Peg said. That right, said Bart. Can you throw a harpoon? No, but I can hook and bait and cast a line quicker than you can change your mind. But Bart laughed and set her to work scrubbing decks, not casting a line. But Peg had a chance to prove herself the next morning. There was a stiff wind blowing, and the captain's hat was knocked right off his head into the water. A Dublin, which is a kind of money, for the one who can catch my hat, said the captain. But Maxwell threw a harpoon and missed the hat the first time. Curse that wind, he shouted. He threw again and missed again. Oh, pucks on that stormy sea. He swung, snatching up another. I'll do it, said Peg. She grabbed her line and rod, and she threw with all her might, and threw right to the hat that hooked on the hat hooked on the at the first try. But Max gave her a look that said, "Well, nice going, girl, but I bet you can't do that again." The next day, the whale came. Look at them. Oh, now you can see. "There she blows," hollered the sailor from the crow's nest. Before the men could even get to the whaleboats, Peg was at the side with her fishing rod. She swung the rod back over her shoulder and cast with all her might. The whale took the hook, and the line played out faster than a tune in the Jack-in-the-Box. "I got her," she shouted. She tied herself to the ship's mast and held on tight. Goodness sakes. Well, the mast bent nearly double, and the whale pulled the Viking through the ocean on a Nantucket sleigh ride. "The lass has hooked herself a whale," the sailors said in amazement. "She's reeling it in," they said. "She's reeling in a whale." "Nice fishing, girl," said Bart Maxwell, and in a flash he cut all the rope holding Peg to the mast. You can see the whale has taken the vine, and if she's not tied anymore, I wonder what. Peg flew through the air, hit the water, and went skipping over the waves after the whale, still holding her line. Just as well, thought Peg. That old ship was only slowing me down. Then the whale stopped. "Ah, ha, plain tuckered out," she cried, reeling in. She knew she'd met her match, she, the whale. Then the whale turned and came at Peg, big as a blue mountain. "I got you," cried Peg. Peg swallowed whole. There was a tremendous roar of water, and she was spitting and splashing and tumbling and thrashing right down the whale's gullet and into its stomach. It was black as night without a moon or stars, only blacker. Peg lit a waterproof match. She reckoned that there were enough planks and busted beams down there to set up a shop as a carpenter. A cod slapped her feet. See, she felt a bit peakish. She made herself a little fire, hung up her wet clothes to dry, and fried up some fish. Swishing down to the whale's stomach. After she'd eaten and gotten dressed, she figured the only way out was up. So she took some of the busted up wood and thigh bone from an old pirate's skeleton and hammered herself a ladder. Peg climbed back up the whale's gullet and into its mouth. She felt a big draft coming from overhead, then the whale sighed and whoosh! Peg was blasted right up through the blowhole. She reckoned she was about 30 feet in the air before she came back down and landed on the whale's back. Now she could see what was what. Can you imagine? Not I. The Viking was nowhere in sight. Just as well, Peg thought. I didn't much care for their crew. All in all, she was mighty pleased. She wanted to catch herself a whale, and she'd gone and done it. Riding a whale through the Labrador Sea. But after an hour or so, she figured it was probably time to be moving on. "Well," she said, "it looks like you're my way back to shore." But the whale had a mind of its own and took Peg on a tour of the Arctic. Peg kept warm by doing jumping jacks and singing sea shanties, which are sea songs. When it got too cold on the whale, or the whale decided to dive under the water, Peg jumped back down the blowhole and slid into the whale's stomach again. It was damp and a tad smelly, but nothing she wasn't used to. And there were plenty of fish for eating. She built herself a little bunk to nap in, and it felt just like home, really. Darndest thing if she didn't start feeling sort of fond of that whale. She even has a pillow. Oh my goodness. But Peg was getting just a mite bored, and if truth be told, a little homesick. Well, she went back to work, sawing and hammering, and made herself the longest rudder in the world to steer the stubborn whale. Didn't look like much, but it seemed to do the trick. She got the whale turned back south. After a few days later, Peg caught the sight of a ship on the horizon. The Viper? No, her mother and father's fishing boat. Peg gave the whale a little pat. "Good work," she said. The whale went alongside the boat, and Peg stepped onto that deck. She was a little stiff and frozen around the edges, but none the worse for wear. The whale blew up a big geyser of water and dove into the sea. "Peg, we were a little worried about you," said her mother. "Looks like you went and caught yourself a whale," said her father. "Well, you know," Peg said, "a whale is not a fish, so I figured I'd let it go." "Very good then," said her father. Peg stayed on fishing for a while, but she was pushing 8, and she figured it was high time to move on and make something of herself. After all, she wanted big, she wanted better, she wanted best. And she moved on.